On August 19th, 1973, one of the most successful martial art films was released in theaters all across the United States. This was only a month after one of its stars suddenly passed away. 2023 marks two notable 50-year anniversaries: the passing of the late Bruce Lee on July 20th, and the premiere of his biggest international hit, Enter the Dragon, shortly thereafter. Rather than dive into the drawn-out speculation of how a man like Lee could die so young, I'd like to pay tribute to the martial arts legend by focusing on what he worked tirelessly to create in the final year of his life. A co-production of Warner Brothers and Lee's own company known as Concord, the story behind the scenes is as tumultuous as the dynamic action captured on film. My name is Aaron, celebrating the 50-year anniversary of one of the most memorable pieces in cinema history that is still a blast to revisit today. This is a tale of Enter the Dragon. Fresh off of setting his third consecutive box office record in Hong Kong with The Way of the Dragon in 1972, the lead actor, producer, writer, and director of the film still was not completely satisfied, especially after screening the film to his brother Peter, who was less than impressed. In response, Lee set out to create a new film that would closely resemble his own philosophy on the martial arts: the importance of one's ability to adapt, illustrated by the main character battling 5 different martial artists in each floor of the wooden pagoda in South Korea. Unlike his first 3 films, where the main character sought retribution, this film was a chase for the reward at the top of the structure so he could rescue his kidnapped siblings. This was the genesis for The Game of Death, his most ambitious picture yet. Despite not having the complete story written out, he set to work on filming the final 3 fights with Danny Nosanto, Jihan Jae, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as his 3 opponents. For comical relief, he enlisted James Tien, who had co-starred with Lee in The Big Boss, and stuntman Chae Yoon as his remaining allies on the climb up the pagoda. Around this time, Lee had been in contact with then-president of Warner Brothers, Ted Ashley, discussing the possibility of a new American film project starring the HK box office sensation. Lee briefly mentioned this possible collaboration in an interview with Alex Ben Block in 1972 during the making of The Way of the Dragon. While filming The Game of Death, producer Fred Weintraub paid Lee a visit after being impressed with a screening of his first box office sensation, The Big Boss. The folks at Warner Brothers were still concerned with whether or not a Chinese hero could carry an American picture, but the record numbers in Hong Kong provided an incentive to take a chance on the little dragon. After weeks of intense back-and-forth negotiations between Lee and Warner Brothers involving creative direction, a deal was reached on November 23, 1972. The new film project would be the first of its kind, a Hollywood feature co-produced by Warner Brothers and Lee's production company Concord, shot in Hong Kong with a film crew consisting of both American and Chinese members. With Michael Allen drafting the script, all fight sequences choreographed by Lee, producer Paul Heller joining Weintraub for behind-the-scenes duties, Robert Klaus as the director, and a budget of $850,000. Filming was set to begin in January of 1973. Although Lee was the main star, Warner Brothers decided to cast 2 more leading men alongside him since the impression was that the martial artist was relatively unknown outside of Hong Kong. To complement the main character, a Shaolin monk also named Lee, New York native John Saxon, who had been a martial artist since the 1950s, was brought on to portray gambling addict Roper after the increased popularity of karate enticed him to join. The role of martial artist Williams, initially assigned to Rockne Tarkington, was then assigned to Kentucky native Jim Kelly, who had gained recognition as the middleweight champion at Ed Parker's International Karate Tournament in the early 1970s. Kelly's inclusion in the picture was finalized a mere 2 days before the film crew flew over to Hong Kong to begin work on the film. For the role of the main antagonist, Lee chose veteran Hong Kong actor Kin Shik to play Han, the one-handed man who loved stroking cats way before Dr. Evil did. Further supporting roles included Angela Mao as Lee's sister Su Lin, Mr. Hong Kong, the Chinese Hercules, Bolo Young as Bolo, Han's enforcer, Bob Wall as O'Hara, Han's personal bodyguard, Anna Capri as Tanya, Han's secretary, Australian martial artist Peter Archer as the New Zealand tournament participant Parsons, and Betty Chung as the undercover Mei Ling. When filming began in January, one of the stars did not show up. Indeed, Lee had taken a stand once again due to creative differences. A growing concern over Saxon potentially being presented as the main star instead of him, a clear distaste for the original title of the film, Blood and Steel, and a keen insistence of how his Chinese culture should be presented all helped contribute to Lee sitting out for a total of 12 days. On top of this, the American and Chinese crew members initially had a tough time working together due to the language barrier. However, Lee eventually came in to work, and the opposing film crew members grew to respect each other as time progressed. After 80 days, a ton of mirrors purchased for $8,000 for the final showdown, an extra scene shot by Lee for the opening, and a few incidents on set involving real broken bottles and a challenge to Lee from one of the stuntmen, the summer of 1973 had arrived. Plans for a potential film franchise was now up in the air, but there was one more thing that had to be changed before Lee would consider being a part of it: the title of the film. To symbolize his character's emergence into a higher state of quality throughout the picture, and as a nod to his Chinese name of Little Dragon, Lee demanded for his new film to be called Enter the Dragon in June of 1973. Within the same month, his title was greenlit, and the film premiere was slated for August 19. In one of his final letters, Lee described to Ted Ashley exactly how dedicated he was to creating the best film possible. "You see, Ted, my obsession is to make, pardon the expression, the fuckingest action motion picture that has ever been made." Enter the Dragon, the film Bruce Lee had been working toward for several years, finally became a reality in the United States on August 19th, 1973. Our story begins with the aforementioned scene that Lee wrote and directed in the latter stages of shooting. Lee faces off against martial artist Sammo Hung at the Shaolin Temple in what can be described as a mixed martial arts match years before the sport became a global phenomenon. Complementing the action wonderfully here is the first piece composed by Lalo Schifrin, the genius behind the Mission Impossible television show theme from the 1960s. From the outset, Lee's Jeet Kune Do is on display as the monk intercepts several of his opponent's incoming attacks with his own. Despite showcasing some impressive athleticism, Hung's character endures impactful throws before being forced to submit. After the combatants bow before the temple, Lee's victory calls for a celebration. Fancy acrobatics will do nicely. Due to a concern about its appeal to Western audiences of the time, the following scene was not in the original screening of the film. Thankfully, it was restored later on by Warner Brothers, starting with their DVD release of Enter the Dragon from 1998. More of Lee's philosophies are expressed in a wonderful conversation between master and pupil. Teacher is pleased with his student reaching a level of spiritual insight with his physical skills. Lee says a good martial artist should have no technique, always flexible enough to adapt to any situation in combat, without a second thought. Not thinking, yet not dreaming. And when there is an opportunity,
I do not hit. It hits all by itself.
remember, Lee, the enemy has only images and illusions.
Destroy the image, and you will break the enemy.
Teacher then shares the name of the one who dared to use their sacred knowledge of strength for his own base ends. Han. Lee is asked to reclaim the honor of the Shaolin Temple. The next scene is exactly where the original screening of the film picked up after the opening bout. Lee has a meeting with Mr. Brithwaite, an agent from a British intelligence group. Upon receiving an invitation to an upcoming martial arts tournament hosted by Han, the monk is highly encouraged to attend by the intelligence agent. Suddenly, it's Lao's time. Tong Wei, who would go on to have an accomplished career as a director in Hong Kong, portrays Lee's student and learns a memorable lesson on the importance of emotional content. Don't think, feel, the master monk enforces, comparing this to a finger pointing away to the moon.
Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory.
It's a scene that never grows stale, goosebumps every time. And never take your eyes off your opponent, young Lao, even when you bow. The opening credits roll before a montage of shots on location in Hong Kong. The first appearances of Roper and Williams as Schifrin's score continues making history. Lee then learns more information about his latest target. Footage of his bodyguard Ohara in action. These shots of Han's Island legitimately captured on a plane flown by Ray Chow, the same man who plays Teacher, and the agent's theory on what is really going on. Girls mysteriously being kidnapped, drugged, and even found dead on the harbor like this poor soul. The autopsy revealed it was an OD. Problem is, Brithwaite and his agency have no evidence that Han is responsible for the dirty work. All they have is a lead on his martial arts tournament that takes place every 3 years. Yes, it's a James Bond type of operation for our hero. Go to the island, gather the evidence, and come back in one piece to return it to Brithwaite. The agency promises to give Lee anything he needs for the mission, except guns. No, those are outlawed on this island. Fortunately, the monk is quite a weapon himself. The plan: contact the agency via a specific radio system on the island, and then reinforcements will take over. Also, locate Mei Ling, an undercover operative posing as one of Han's many ladies. After this amazing visual of Lee sailing to the ship headed to the island, we have a flashback. The monk pays a visit to this elder man who happened to be with Lee's sister, Su Lin, prior to her unfortunate end. The flashback to the flashback shows the two making their way into town before Ohara and his gang of Han thugs start harassing her. But Su Lin is having none of this crap. She starts kicking ass, and the man recounting this story slices Ohara's face with a knife. Oh, so that's how he ended up with the scar. Lee's sister makes a run for it, with each of Han's men enduring vicious shots each time they momentarily stop her. This guy's stunt into the water is still great. After this woman refuses to help, Su Lin really did not want this guy to have any children. Sadly, she is eventually trapped with nowhere to go. Ohara is a bloody mess, but that doesn't stop him from closing in. Instead of further abuse, Su Lin makes a tough choice, and you know what happens from there. That's all Lee needed. This mission is now personal. Excellent acting from Lee as we see him shed a tear. At his mother's grave, the monk begs his kin to forgive him for what he's about to do. Writer Michael Allen's suggestion to have this lady sweeping up the area in between shots appears, symbolizing that it's Lee's turn to sweep up the bad guys that have disgraced his family and his temple. Roper is closing in, signaling that it's time for his backstory. The gambling man is in the middle of his latest wager at a golf course. It's all in the hips, Roper. All you need to do is tap it in now. Great, he missed. As his secretary takes a message for him, what kind of a shot was that? As he looks for the ball, a trio of debt collectors, led by Tang Sudo black belt Pat E. Johnson, wants 175 big ones by Monday the 15th. And by the 15th, Pat means now.
It's the dough, Roper, or we gotta break something.
This memorable line is not nearly enough to protect the collectors from an ass whooping. Great to see Pat Johnson here before his involvement in the Karate Kid 11 years later. Dude, he actually got the ball back on the green. Roper has had enough of this crap and is ready to board his flight to Hong Kong, but not before generously donating his remaining balance of $63.43 to his secretary. Back in Hong Kong, can you smell what the Sax is cooking? Look at how many suitcases he brought. How did he afford the extra carry-on luggage charge? A short time later, this young mother is rowing the boat with Williams on board as her little one is securely fastened onto her back. That's incredible, isn't it? Williams' flashback begins, where he is bidding farewell to his Kempo master as a class takes place. How cool is this man Jim Kelly? Later that evening, Williams is stopped by the Fuzz. They conduct a search, but the officers soon push this man a little too far. He takes them out, giving this hungry canine a big meal. As Williams' boat approaches the main ship to the island, old friends reunite after 6 long years. These two fought together in Vietnam, and not much has changed. Roper still loves going first class, and Williams is still quick to note how every ghetto in the world is the same. They stink. The War Buddies recognize the Kiwi martial artist named Parsons, but they have no idea who Lee is. The ship to Hans Island is on the move, and we are treated with more impeccable shots out at sea. During the trip, Roper can't help himself. He bets Lee $100 that the big praying mantis will defeat the small one, with the odds at 5-1. Can you believe that, folks? Roper loses another wager. Lee is very amused. Parsons then harasses this lad hauling oranges. Lee is not amused. And he's even less impressed when Parsons challenges him. "What's your style?" asks the Kiwi man.
You can call it the art of fighting without fighting.
Parsons wants to see some of that now, so Lee suggests they take a boat to that island on the beach to throw down. And that is where the Kiwi man messed up. That's certainly a badass way to outwit a bully. Lee hands over the rope to this little guy, and look at him having the time of his life. Parsons raising his fist at the camera here cracks me up every time. Before long, the journey ends, and Roper is in love already. Bolo and Tanya greet their latest guests, and as they guide them into the island, the camera pans out to reveal this incredible shot of all the martial artists practicing their skills in unison. 50 years later, this sequence is still fantastic. It's the welcome ceremony. Sumo wrestlers, fancy acrobatics, women with food, bird cages, handstands. Han sure knows how to throw a party. Mr. Roper seems to be very much at home here, so why is he apprehensive? Don't con Lee now, spit it out. He does, but not with the monk. With his old friend from Nam, of course. Roper thinks they're all being fattened up for the kill. Suddenly, all the action stops as the host of the tournament enters the arena. Because of his thick accent at the time, Kin's voice was dubbed by Key Luke, who first rose to prominence as Lee Chan, the son of Charlie Chan, during the 1930s. Han welcomes his new guests to the island with a few gifts: specialized darts latched onto apples by as many ladies, including Mei Ling. These two are giddy with excitement, but Lee is not. Okay, bye now. As soon as the doors close, the action resumes as if Han never showed up. I've always loved that. How cool is this man Jim Kelly? Tanya arrives with another surprise for Williams: a pool of ladies to choose from for the evening. She really shouldn't have, but that doesn't stop him from choosing 4 of them. Sorry, Tanya, you must understand. He's a little tired tonight. Lee's turn. He'll only need 1 tonight: the owner of this dart. Oh, now Mr. Roper. Is there any doubt as to who he picks? Definitely not. Another birdcage. Hey, it's Mei Ling. Lee wastes no time in asking her for any information on their target. All she knows is that the girls all eventually disappear, and she fears she'll be next. We then shift to Lee doing katas, and I'm sure everyone has imitated this scene at some point. Truly awesome. At the end of this kick is that bastard Ohara, telling Lee that he must attend the morning ritual in uniform.
Outside.
The monk does not show up in uniform, and there's nothing this lad can do about it. Han arrives.
Bolo!
Go!
And the tournament begins. Sweet, it's Williams versus Parsons. While Roper is off to the side betting again, his old friend destroys the Kiwi by knockout. With plenty of bread in hand, it's Roper's turn to fight. His opponent is played by Tony Liu, who also appeared in The Big Boss and The Way of the Dragon. Williams is instructed to bet 8-3 all the way. Roper allows himself to get smacked around a bit before the same bettor from earlier agrees to wager once again. Williams gives his friend the signal, and Roper kicks his opponent into another dimension. This guy's reaction is hilarious. Later that evening, while the 2 war buddies each have a great time with their respective ladies, Lee is preparing to get to that radio. With a last smile goodbye to Mei Ling, the monk sets off into the moonlight. Avoiding this guard with nunchakus is a breeze, but he alerts a real rabid dog. Lee takes out this guard and avoids another by swiftly jumping into this tree. Before long, the monk finds the secret entrance and uses a long rope to descend. As he surveys the workers down below, a guard finds the rope and cuts it. Great. Unfortunately for him, Lee climbed back up. Williams does some katas in the moonlight and marvels at the sight of this human fly. The next day, Han is not amused. He knows about the attack on his guards, but instead of concentrating on the attacker, he commands Bolo to discipline the incompetent soldiers. The enforcer takes great pleasure in this, performing several fatalities in the process. Damn, this one has been broken in half. It's time for Lee to fight in the tournament. His opponent? That's all he needed. Instead of a bow, Ohara punches a board to the other side of the island.
Boards don't hit back.
With Su Lin embedded on his mind, the first strike lands for the monk, as does the second. His speed here is incredible. Ohara does better the 3rd time, but he still gets knocked down.
Ohara!
For that, he eats a killer backflip kick. Enraged, the bodyguard goes for a jumping roundhouse kick, but the monk counters with a stiff kick to the nuts from the ground. Lee toys with this man and lands several roundhouse kicks. And then, the moment. Bruce Lee legitimately kicks the tar out of Bob Wall, sending him crashing into the men behind him, one of which sustained a broken arm in the process of catching him. Can you believe Wall took a total of 12 of these kicks behind the scenes? Lee bows, but Ohara is still not done. Now the reason why the little dragon didn't hold back on the real kick from earlier. His hand was legitimately cut by these broken bottles during one of the takes. Ohara is down again, but this time, Lee ensures it stays that way. Su Lin has been avenged. Phenomenal scene. Tanya informs Williams that Han wants to see him in his study, so the two war buddies agree to meet up again in a half an hour. But Roper smells a rat. At the study, Han is impressed with Williams' unorthodox but effective style. The thing is, the host believes it is defeat the young man must learn to prepare for. But Williams won't waste his time with that.
I'll be too busy looking good.
The conversation turns sour when Han demands to know who the second man was outside the palace the night before. Williams has had enough of Han-Man's crap, but reinforcements quickly enter the fray.
Man, you come right out of a comic book.
It doesn't end well for the guards, especially this guy who eats another back fist from his own master. Williams lands a kick on one of Han's arms, but it's clearly no ordinary arm. Look at Ken Shik! This man was in his 60s performing his own stunts here. The two fight to a standstill, until one of the birds that escaped from the cage Han broke goes for Williams' eyes. The evil host takes full advantage, landing several vicious shots in front of his amused harem. It isn't long before Han ensures his foe won't be getting up from this beating. I still get bummed out seeing Williams die here. What a cool character he was. Oh, that's why that kick to the arm was ineffective. Later on, Roper is given a tour of Han's personal museum. Don't worry, the host says. They'll both be meeting Williams later. A souvenir, huh? Right. Now place your head on the guillotine, Mr. Roper. No? Okay, let's place Snowbell on here. The gambler is not about to wager anyone's life today, letting the cat run free with its 8 remaining lives. Oh, the switch merely activated the lift they are standing on. Faked out again. Behold, the underground lair. You've got a power plant, a lifetime supply of women. Wait, his daughters? Han then exposes his true motives. Pure corruption with the help of the addictive substance known as opium. Why does he share all this? He wants Roper to represent him in the United States. Ah, so the tournament is all a ruse to simply recruit new talent into Han's world of corruption. And here are lost drunken souls without a care in the world. Of course. Good lord. Well, at least Han wasn't lying when he said they would meet Williams later. The guard sends the fallen lad from Nam in there. Enraged, Roper makes it clear that there's no misunderstanding here. Later that night, Lee is hot on the trail. This time, he'll get to that radio, or maybe not. That cobra legitimately got fed up during the filming of this scene and bit Lee in between takes. Thankfully, the venom had been taken out. The monk easily subdues the snake into his bag and resumes his initial strategy. He takes out one of the guards before a desperate 17-year-old girl drugged by Han begs to be set free. What an evil bastard. Hey, there it is. And how convenient. The monk has the perfect tool to distract these fools. There have been several noteworthy shots in this film so far, but this has to rank up there with the best of them. These two lads are so frightened, one of them tosses a chair through the window to ensure their escape. This shot here always cracks me up. Okay, time to alert the intelligence. As Lee works the radio, he uses the Cobra as a surfboard to keep it still. That's really Lee putting his weight on the snake. Producer Paul Heller makes a cameo as the radio operator, as Lee has successfully alerted the forces. But the alarm has been set off, forcing the monk to fight his way back out. What follows are some of the most captivating fight sequences ever filmed. One by one, Han's guards are dismantled by the Shaolin monk, and you bet some of them are crushed in slow motion. This guy meets his doom Ohara style, and look, it's Jackie Chan! The action slows down momentarily as this lift won't budge. Lee calmly turning around here before more reinforcements arrive was a great way to let the audience catch their breath. How badass is that? The lift opens, inviting more of Han's goons to be destroyed, this time with their own weapons. Through the window! Oh my god! Han's prisoners actually help Lee behind bars as he continues taking these lads to school. Hey, somebody brought some nunchakus. The monk takes them away and harkens back to Fist of Fury and the Way of the Dragon. Even though Lee using his signature weapon here flies by rather quickly, it's still incredible to witness in such a big film like this. But all good things come to an end. The monk is eventually trapped. Han showers Lee with admiration, calling his skills extraordinary. Meanwhile, Braithwaite is slow to awaken to the news of Lee sending the signal, "Get the bloody colonel on the line!" The next day, Roper arrives to discover Lee restrained with Bolo. This calls for an edification, a clear thrashing of the monk by the gambler himself. Bolo frees Lee for the battle as Mei Ling slips away unnoticed. Roper refuses to fight Lee by confirming a point Han made during the tour of the underground lair. There's a point he won't go beyond. Well then, you'll fight Bolo instead. At first, the Enforcer's strength keeps the gambler off balance, but eventually, with a bite to the leg and some quick, stiff jabs, Roper gains control of the fight. Meanwhile, Mei Ling frees the prisoners for an all-out war against Han. Double switch kick by Roper, and Bolo dies a slow, painful death. Handman has had enough of this crap, sending anyone and everyone to kill the new tag team of Lee and Roper. Well, you're gonna need much more than that, Han, because these two are kicking the hell out of all of them. Get to the chopper! Dog, this is like the first dojo battle from Fist of Fury, reincarnated for the big Warner Brothers picture. Lee kicking several goons left and right in a very similar manner he did during that piece from 1972. I love this. Before we know it, the freed captives arrive on the scene, and it's a giant martial arts Royal Rumble. Lalo Schifrin's score really delivers the goods here, as Han's men are at a quick disadvantage. He notices this, calling for desperate measures. Using his new claw, this poor lad's face is in tatters. Lee clears out more goons behind him before catching Han's eye. It's double personal now. Han draws first blood, but this only enrages Lee. An elbow to the traitor's face frees him of the claw, and he decides to bounce. The monk dashes after him, leading to another standoff in Han's museum.
You have offended my family. and you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
Great, now he has a bigger claw. Lee's other cheek is slashed, but his speed overwhelms his opponent. During a jump, Han draws even more blood on Lee's abdomen. But he really shouldn't have, as his reward is one of the coolest jump kicks to the face ever. More back and forth action leads to a chest slash, another big mistake. Oh great. Lee's speed and quickness are too much. Or are they? I remember getting so scared at this shot as a kid until it cut to Lee clocking him with a back fist. I legitimately thought the monk had been stabbed. Han-Man retreats. Where? To the endless wall of mirrors stage. Placing the cameras inside mirrors during filming, what resulted was even more cinematic history. Without a clear sight of his opponent, Lee is now at a disadvantage. After enduring another slice to the back and some stiff shots, the monk backs off for a moment to recall a piece of advice from teacher.
Destroy the image, and you will break the enemy.
That's exactly what the pupil does, in the literal sense. Several punches and kicks to the mirrors destroy Han's illusion, leaving him wide open for a powerful sidekick. The impact sends the traitor soaring back into the spear from earlier. The honor of Su Lin's memory and the honor of the Shaolin Temple have been restored. Fantastic end to a memorable battle. That was also for Williams, you evil bastard. Back outside, Roper and the freed captives have defeated Han's goons. While resting, the gambler notices something that makes him shudder. Tanya has been killed. That sucks. Lee reappears with enough left in the tank to give the thumbs up to Roper. As the choppers finally close in on the island, the film ends with the camera pointed at that claw. As we all know, Bruce Lee did not get to attend the premiere of Enter the Dragon in August of 1973. It's a shame, really, especially after finding out that he was scheduled to appear on the Johnny Carson show to promote the film on the same month. Could you imagine how cool that would have been? Nevertheless, despite the decrease in box office numbers for Enter the Dragon in Hong Kong due to his sudden death, the film went on to become a box office smash internationally, bringing in a total of $90 million that year. The Little Dragon had gone out on top. The performances, action, cinematography, humor, and very quotable dialogue all helped open the door for further collaboration between Hollywood and Hong Kong for years to come. Best of all, Lee did see a rough cut of the movie before passing away, and he was really pleased with it. 50 years later, this film is still a blast to rewatch. Rest in peace to the following individuals who helped bring this piece to the big screen: Bruce Lee, John Saxon, Jim Kelly, Ken Shek, Key Luke, Jeffrey Weeks, Peter Archer, Bob Wall, Anna Capri, Fred Weintraub, Robert Klaus, Paul Heller, and Lee Jen Ho. If there's anyone I missed, I apologize. It's been an honor to cover this classic movie on the channel with you on this big day in martial art film history. To conclude our discussion today, here are some final words from the Little Dragon himself during an interview back in 1972. Even though I, Bruce Lee, may die someday without fulfilling all my ambitions, I feel no sorrow. I did what I wanted to do. What I've done with sincerity and to the best of my ability. You can't expect much more from life. Parsons then harasses this lad, haunting. Parsons then harasses this lad, haunting oranges. Excellent.